at 8:30, I don't think. There's some meaty ones. Right, here we go.
Sorry, this might be a tangent, just a quick say, oh, this is a technical one, let's refer this question, take it to Will's on Monday. Or
Yeah. I mean, I think certainly if we're struggling to, yeah. Because yeah, I mean, we'll see how we get on. We'll try our best, but it may not be good enough. Right, you're right, everyone. I'm pretty sure we're nearly. Here we go. Yeah, cool. Right, hold on, guys. Just let me do my usual. If you're here tonight, well done for remembering it's Wednesday. I realised as we shut down on Monday that it was Wednesday, not Thursday, and I wasn't quick enough to actually tell everyone. So yeah, welcome if you are here. We've had a lot of questions come in the week, which is awesome. Really interesting ones. As always, please don't share personal data in the live chat, and I will prioritize the questions that have come in through the week, which are anonymized. So you'll see what I mean by that. Essentially, it's all about changing the question from the actual initial question through to what if something like this happened. You get the same answer. Hey, right, Stella. But you will essentially, it helps you isolate what the issue is that you actually need to find out about, and it helps us just answer stuff, and you don't have to put your personal data all online, which is awesome. We're minus, hey, right, Anton, we're minus Will tonight because he also forgot he can't do Wednesdays. And I think also next week I can't do Thursday either because it's my boy's birthday. So probably going to be next Wednesday as well, but I'll think about that as we go through the day. Yeah, cool. So yeah, you're not legal advice. That's everything we've got to say. So this ain't legal advice. We do our best, but it's in no way a substitute for proper legal advice. Speaking of which, Vogo Solicitor does have some capacity at the moment. So if you are in need of a solicitor, you might want to give them a call, and hopefully Karis will pick up the phone to you. So let's get the old screen up and get going with the first question, which is, hold on, bear with me. In fact, let me just do something else as well. Sorry, guys. Let's put that in bold. There we go. Yeah, cool. So share the screen, and here we go. So question one, what does it mean if someone receives this type of offer of non-secure temporary accommodation in compliance with section 193, subsection 5 of the Housing Act 1996? We are writing to inform you of our offer of suitable temporary accommodation to meet our duty to you. This offer is expected to ensure that suitable accommodation is available to you, not end that duty. What does it mean, not end the duty? Thank you. So, okay, so this sounds very much like it's the duty owed. Essentially, what is probably, well, what has happened here is the council's accepted they owe the main duty to this person, and essentially they then have this duty to provide accommodation until they have accommodation to end the duty into. So like social housing or private rented or whatever. If it's a main duty accepted, it's going to be social housing or a 12-month assured short hold tenancy. It has to be decent. So it's really good. It's a very good position to be in. So, but I mean, in some areas you might be in temporary accommodation for like 10 years before you actually get your final home. Other areas it's like days. So it does depend whereabouts you are. If you're wondering about that, I did a video a little while ago about, I think it's called How Long Does It Take to Get Housed, something like that. So I kind of go through the averages that I was able to find and give you an idea of what sort of waiting times are and how much they vary around the country. So you can find your local authority in that video to see what the average waiting times are and how big the bedroom size and stuff like that is. So yeah, that's all that means effectively. So it's good news, but it does mean you're going to be in temporary accommodation for the time being until the council actually provides you with your long term, your proper home. So I'm hoping that answers that question. Shannon and Karis, just feel free to interrupt whenever you want to. But if not, we'll go to question two, which is a very cool one. I like this one. So I'm getting in touch with people who have lived experience of being told to sleep rough or gate kept in my area. If I receive a few responses, I plan to anonymise their stories to write to the MP or mayor or mayor, or even the journalist to show it wasn't just us this happened to. So just to give it a bit of context, I think this person has essentially been trying to help someone else who has been rough sleeping and has basically been told, we need to find you rough sleeping in order to help out, which is legally nonsense, but it's very common practice. I did check today, and Homeless Link do still promote that practice, which I am interested by. So yeah, that's kind of what happened. So it sounds like that happened to this person and the person they're supporting. but they also know it's happening elsewhere, so they want to know, okay, how do you actually get this sort of thing changed? And I think, well, there's a question and a comment I'll give. So there's an answer and a comment I'll try and give. So in answer to the question, in terms of sharing people's stories, effectively, if they give their consent, then technically speaking, you don't have to anonymize it at all. But I would heavily suggest you do. And the test is, can someone figure out who you're talking about? So you'll notice in a lot of case studies I'll talk about, or examples I give, I've changed everything about that story except the bits which are relevant. So their gender, their age, what illnesses they've got. So there is no way. The only way, I mean, you would not be able to know who I'm talking about, even if you had a lucky guess. That's not the same thing as knowing. So essentially, that would be the test. Before the Data Protection Act 2018 came in, there was this, in the previous law, there was this idea of a motivated intruder. And essentially the question was, can someone without breaking the law figure out who you're talking about? But if you're anonymizing it and kind of keeping those details all out of it, then it would be anonymized, and you've also got their consent as well. So, okay, you're kind of doubly covered. So that's my answer to that. I would also make a comment here in terms of kind of raising it as an issue. I don't want to put this person off at all. I really don't. I would suggest trying to take it to the LGO and get the LGO to uphold it first before you then take it to the mayor and the MP. Because if you just basically try and tell a mayor and an MP that the council's breaking the law, my experience anyway is that they'll be like, well, what? So what are you talking about? Our council doesn't break the law. So you need the LGSCO to, yeah, essentially have investigated and hopefully upheld it and then take it. That would be kind of how I would do it. It obviously takes longer. Yeah, this will probably take a year if you're going to do it that way, because by the time you get through the complaints process and onto the LGO, that's how long it takes. But that would be probably what I'd say. And my experience with journalists is they are not interested. As in they're not even, I mean, the journalists I've worked with have generally just been not very curious people. I'm like, are you not? Yeah, I mean, we've got a couple of ones local who are really cool, but I had the BBC ring up the other day and they were just like, just didn't seem to compute anything. So yeah, that's my answer. Um, Shannon and Karis, you got anything to add to that?
I think so. The only thing I have to add to it is it's really, really common when you gather like lived experience stories that it's like a whole load of trauma. And obviously that is part of the point of this, is to sort of highlight how bad the system is and the impact that has on people. But I would, if I was interviewing people, or sort of gathering those stories, I would obviously, and I'm sure this person's going to do this, but really make sure that they're comfortable with any bits and the parts of their story that they're sharing is relevant to the point you're trying to make. Um, but I would also sort of try and get those people to think about what could have happened differently to sort of to have changed their situation from like a negative experience to a positive experience. And obviously, like we're talking about gatekeeping and sort of verification here, so arguably the answer is going to be to be treated lawfully. But I think actually having that in a person who's gone through that in their words is going to be really powerful. And them saying, if the housing officer did X, Y, and Z, I would no longer be whatever, whatever, whatever. Like it's way, those solutions are way more powerful in their words than it is by saying this is the law and this is why this is the solution. Because you're sort of you come in with the human element of all the trauma and then you go to like the logical element of the solution and it doesn't quite marry up. So if you can try and keep some of that emotion in the solution bit, I think it will be quite effective. Does that make sense? I feel like I've sort of
Yeah,
rambled and
crystal
jumbled
clear.
there,
That's
but
great. Yeah, thanks, Shannon.
yeah.
Um,
Sorry, I was
and
just
oh, sorry,
saying,
Karis, go on.
sorry. Just with someone's personal story, I would say give them time to so they on the spot they say, yeah, I consent to you sharing and talking about my story. Give them a few weeks to change their mind. So after you've spoken to them and just give them that slow time before it's released is all I'd say. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's cool. Yep, all good. I don't know if it'd be of interest to this person, but on if because I was on it today for some reason, but in fact, because I saw this question. So if you go on Homeless Link's website and search for the term verification, there's a report thing they did like I can't remember if it's 6 months ago or 18 months ago, but basically they asked a bunch of people who've been homeless about the verification process in general, and it just might be interesting to read kind of responses, because the responses were pretty much unanimously negative, and yet there wasn't kind of any sort of like actual kind of findings from the report as such. So yeah, but
And
again, it might be, sorry, Shannon.
no, sorry, because I was part of that discussion group actually that they then did that report on, and even the workers were sort of talking about how they don't really understand the verification process and why it exists and everything else. So it's a good resource to look at. And actually, I should have mentioned it earlier, but Expert Link has some really good resources on their website around like storytelling, and how to get that out of there and making sure it's not tokenistic and things like that. So that's probably another resource worth checking out.
Yeah, cool. Hey, what, Tiff? You're not allowed to apologise for being late here. It's all good. I'm just going to add in Anton's question here at this point, because it's kind of talking about what we're talking about a little bit. So, what's the point of having laws when local legal framework mainly overrules the law? Why isn't it the same law across the board? The discretion shouldn't be left to a person being housed. So, yeah, discretion of housing. So I mean, basically, this again, this comes back to the homeless application process is the same across England, but the housing register applications are set locally, and it's not it's not the housing officer. Well, the housing officers breaking their own policy is a different issue, but the policy itself, councils have a fair amount of kind of wiggle room they've got around how they set their housing register policies, and they're kind of generally kind of, yeah, they're on a continuum. So kind of, some are really extreme, like, decorum, 10 years you've got to live there, whereas other areas you don't have to live there for any length of time at all. But yeah, so it's in one sense it is legal. So the law says every area has its own policy. So it's not that in its sense isn't unlawful. It's essentially recognizing that particularly places like London, because they've got so stretched for housing resources, South Coast places as well, those kind of places, big cities, they essentially have some discretion to write a policy which basically reduces the amount of people on their register. That's what it's really about. Shannon.
But yeah, but also I think like, going back to sort of verification and without like going on a rant too much, but I think actually a lot of the local policies, people don't realize that it's counteracting the law and it's promoting unlawful processes. So there's not actually the knowledge there to be like, oh, verification 9 times, like 100 times out of 10 is, not lawful because you're gatekeeping. And so I think this is where it gets messy and grey. And then when local authorities employ charities to do that for them, that becomes an issue. And so I think even though the legal framework is the same, each local authority looks so different as well. So they'll have different pressures and they'll have different sort of like commitments and local plans, and all of this plays into it, which means even though the law's the same, the way it's interpreted, and I'm not trying to be sort of extra compassionate or whatever because it's BS, but the way it's interpreted by, a London housing officer to a rural village housing officer is going to be extremely different because their context is different. So I think, yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I'm
it does. I
gonna
mean, I probably should have made it clear. So verification is not in part 6 or part 7. It's the imaginary. They just came up with it. I mean, literally. I mean, in fact, Bournemouth was one of the, because I think this question relates to Bournemouth. So, um, yeah, Bournemouth, like even like 10, 15 years ago, they were doing this kind of reconnection type work where the charity would just kind of bounce people, pay for a bus ticket to go back somewhere else. So, yeah, but I think, yeah, as I say, I'm hopefully what we've just covered there's some useful stuff in there, even if it's not kind of, yeah, been particularly clear all the way through. So, number 3, is it, and I'm out of my depth already here. So, is it discrimination? Equality Act 2010 to withdraw a permanent offer to a disabled person in temporary accommodation who they perceive as has insufficient support to complete the tenancy process. The reason for the withdrawal was explicitly stated to be that the person required a support worker to complete the tenancy, and no such support was in place, although it was, and that had been clarified. But obviously, it's the explicit reason itself that seems a breach. So I can start us off. Karis might be able to kind of come in and save the day here a little bit. But so what I think we're talking about here is a council who, in this case, sounds like they've accepted the main duty, and then they said, "Oh, this person doesn't have the mental capacity to sign a tenancy," which is technically is legally possible, But my experience of councils trying to do this is pretty woeful, because most housing officers have never had training about how to actually do a mental capacity assessment. So one of the councils I deliver training to, they've got this big kind of endemic problem there, because their colleagues in the housing team literally just kind of make stuff up. They say, oh, they messed up the tenancy before, so they don't have capacity to have a tenancy in future. And it's like, that is in no way what this is all about. This is not what the mental capacity assessment means. So effectively, there will be times when I'll give you an example of someone who worked back in the day. This guy had some pretty, I mean, about as clear as it can be, that he was kind of had some pretty bizarre beliefs. So he basically believed there were two Bedfords. So there's kind of like a replica Bedford and a real Bedford, and kind of like, and they were all kind of slightly different, and kind of he went off on this kind of real like long tangent when he needed to sign up for a property. And it's like, okay, I've got reason to doubt that you've actually got mental capacity to understand any of this, because it was just kind of, it was just, yeah, very much outlandish stuff. So in that situation, he at that point in time did not have the mental capacity to sign the tenancy, or sign, in that case it was a license, but anyway. But that does not end it for a housing officer. It's not like, okay, well, he hasn't got capacity now, so we're just going to, just fob him off then. My next job needed to be, okay, so he hasn't got capacity now, but what support can I give him to have the capacity? So it might be about getting other friends and family involved. It might be asking him at a different time of day where maybe his mental health's a bit better. So you can't just say, oh, they can't sign the tenancy now, they don't have mental capacity. There needs to be an evidenced paper trail of things that the housing officer then did in order to support that person to make or to sign the tenancy. And there's other things they can do as well. Like, say that fails as well, then the next step would be and forgive me, I don't know the actual technical term for this, because you can appoint a deputy, which on principle sounds great, but it takes months to do that. But there's like a fast track version of that, where someone in that mental capacity act types, kind of some sort of role, basically signs the tenancy for them, and does some weird legal stuff which I don't understand, but it can be done. So my answer to this is, in effect, you'd want to, if it was me in this situation, I'd probably I'd probably ask to see the copy of the mental capacity assessment that the housing officer did. It probably won't exist. You might be able to suggest to the client that they do a subject access request to get a copy of their records to show that it doesn't actually exist. And then from that, kind of then a mixture of challenging the housing officer and educating them about what mental capacity actually means and what it doesn't mean. Because as I say, they've never like been taught this stuff at all in their work, and they've never thought to actually go and read the Mental Capacity Act at all to actually find out for themselves. So yeah, so that's kind of part of the answer. In terms of whether it would be a breach of the Equality Act, I mean, it's crazy it sounds, I'm not sure if it does, because there's got to be some specific criteria breached, I think, for it to kind of kick in. But because we were talking about this just before we started tonight. So Karis, have you got anything to help me out with here at all?
Yeah.
Cool.
So the Equality Act 2010, it covers the protected characteristics, and one of them is disability. And you have direct discrimination, which is treating someone less favorably because of their disability. Indirect discrimination, because that's applying a policy or practice that disadvantages disabled people. And there's discrimination arising from a disability, which is treating someone unfavorably because of something connected to their disability without justification. So something connected, it has to be like a chain. And then there's failure to make reasonable adjustments, which is not making necessary changes to accommodate a disabled person's needs. So in terms of them saying your support worker to complete the tenancy, that line is, well, why wasn't a support worker in place when he was doing all the assessments, the paperwork, leading up, like your housing plan, when you've made that homeless application? So they should have been in place from the beginning, when your assessment was done. So it should have been, like Mike said, assessed under the Care Act and your assessment. So why weren't they involved from the beginning? And to complete your tenancy, what does that mean? Complete your tenancy, complete signing it. Is that your tenancy agreement? So breaking this down, it could be that it's a breach of the Equality Act, but it has to be linked to your disability, and I think more arising from your disability, and they should have had support worker in place and go back to them. Although they've explicitly stated the reason of the breach, the reason was that you needed a support worker. Well, why aren't they involved in the first place? Why do you need them now? and explain where they got that from is what I do. If you
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
have, because housing and discrimination kind of go hand in hand. There's a lot on with basing it on discrimination, but it's kind of a separate area of law itself. Discrimination and not many, and it is covered by legal aid, but there aren't very many discrimination lawyers around.
There's
And
sorry, Shannon.
no, go on, Mike.
I was just going to say there's big money available. So whereas the kind of compensation we see from the LGO about leaving someone homeless for 10 months is like a few £1,000s, breaches of the Equality Act are like tens of thousands of pounds. So if you can get a lawyer that does it, then crack on.
Because this would be, they should have made, sorry, reasonable adjustments for you to have to complete your tenancy. That the onus is on the council to make these adjustments for you to complete your tenancy. If there's something you need because of your disability, then it should have been provided for you. And if it wasn't, there should be a reason why it wasn't. And it should have been explained to you and worked with you.
There's a really good service that I came across recently through a few other people called the Equality Advisory and Support Service. And they were actually referred to this place from Citizens Advice, but you can self-refer to it. But they got back and they just really helpfully explained what were the equality breaches, what weren't, why it was an equality breach, and they used quite simple language as well to sort of cut out of that sort of legalese. But one thing that really impressed me with the service is they provide like template letters and template complaints, and they sort of really make it clear like this is where you put in your issue, this is where you don't, and sort of they tailor it all to your case. So that might be something worth
What?
checking out because
Say the name again, Shannon.
Equality Advisory and Support Service. I've not used them personally, but I've known a few people now that have used them and they've had amazing experiences with them. So
Yeah, I'll just put the link into the live chat. Thanks, that's helpful. There we go. Okay, yeah, cool. I'm hoping that there's enough to be getting on with there anyway. I think, yeah, as I say, there are bits I don't know about it, but I certainly know some steps that can be taken. I think what Karis and Shannon were talking about as well would also both be very, yeah, plausible ways forward. So, gosh, some of the things housing officers say, hey, how about this one? If the council told someone they can't help them escape from domestic abuse because they have a good job, is this lawful? No, it's not. Do they only help people with a low income? No, they don't. Also, they were told to go to a refuge rather than offered interim accommodation. Okay, all good questions. Very, very sad that housing officers either say this or actually think this. Who knows which one it is? So the duties under the Housing Act to survivors of domestic abuse are absolute. So I've worked with a few survivors who owned their own home, so they had hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of assets. That is not relevant to the duties that are owed to people. It does mess up their housing benefit down the line, but that's another story. But yeah, so they absolutely can do. So yeah, yeah, I mean, I guess just breaking it down, if someone is homeless because of domestic abuse, then they're automatically in priority needs. What else do I need to say about it that's probably worth saying? There's a bit of a technicality. So let me go back a step. You're legally homeless if it's not reasonable to continue to occupy your current accommodation. You might own your own home, but if you're at risk of domestic abuse in your own home, then you're legally homeless and therefore you're then legally automatically in priority need as well. So assuming you're eligible for assistance or you might be eligible for assistance, if you approach any council and tell them I'm experiencing domestic abuse in my own home, can you help me out with housing, you've satisfied sections 184 and sections 188, which is the duty to accept an application and make inquiries and the duty to provide interim accommodation. So yeah, and there's a whole by the way, there's a whole load of other stuff that housing officers can do as well. I mean, the kind of the accommodation duties are like the backbone of the support under the Housing Act, but there's lots of other stuff they can do as well. They can make helpful referrals. You can get domestic abuse specialist officers who actually can be really good. There's a whole bunch of stuff that they can do. So that's definitely not lawful. Do they only help people with low income again? Yeah, no. So it's not means tested. Although if you have a high income, you may well not get a housing benefit for your temporary accommodation. So you may have to pay the temporary accommodation. But there's another thing you need to understand with that as well is that councils won't probably tell you is that the accommodation they offer has to be affordable. And if you think how expensive some temporary accommodation, kind of units are because they're nightly lets and stuff, actually there's no way anyone, doesn't matter how good if you're on kind of like a moderately good, it's 50k or something, you probably still can't actually afford it. without doing the kind of individual sums. But effectively, what the council need to do is they need to offer interim and temporary accommodation at an affordable rate. So it may mean they've got to top up your income from their own budget. That's the way it has to work. But they have an absolute duty to provide safe accommodation that is suitable, which would include the fact that it's affordable. So income is relevant in the sense that it would define how it gets paid for, but the duty to make it available for that person or that family or whatever, that is just an absolute duty. It doesn't matter about income. And then thirdly, they were told to go to a refuge rather than offered interim accommodation. Again, that's unlawful. I should have let me get the Homelessness Code of Guidance up.
Right. And I'll just say here, the Domestic Abuse Act, it emphasises that anyone experiencing domestic violence should receive assistance and protection, support and protection. That's anyone in the legislation.
Yeah.
And refugees shouldn't be referred to because they're about emergencies, not that's an emergency situation. And then they're not taking into account financial abuse. It comes under is a possibility there.
Yeah.
Right.
Can you guys see this code of guidance? Because I've now can't see anything on my screens. I'm hoping you're seeing the right thing. But yeah, so basically, 21.42, the code of guidance. By the way, if you haven't seen the show before, seen the live stream before, the code of guidance is basically the council's rule book. It's called guidance, but it's not like, do it if you feel like it. It's statutory guidance. It's telling councils how to follow the law, how to interpret the law. And there's a whole chapter, you can just Google it, it's PDF. So you can, so chapter 21 is all about domestic abuse. And so if we read this paragraph here, 21.42, for victims at risk from highly dangerous perpetrators, refuges will usually be the most appropriate choice. But note that that does not mean to say that it is the only necessary choice. It's not the only option still. It's just, that's that would be probably the best way forward. But the applicant can still say no. Refuges provide key short-term intensive support for those who flee from abuse. Given the intensity of the support and the vulnerability of victims, attention should be paid to the length of time they spend in refuge. Refuges are not simply a substitute for other forms of temporary accommodation. Probably stop there, but you can obviously read it yourselves. So that's the first thing to say. And then there's another bit which might also kind of help us out here a little bit. So 21.39, housing authorities should recognise that injunctions ordering a person not to molest, non-molestation orders, or not to live in a home or enter a surrounding area, occupation orders, or not behave in a way that attempts to force an individual to marry, forced marriage protection order, may not always be effective in deterring some perpetrators from carrying out further abuse. I'd probably say it's ineffective at deterring most perpetrators from continuing the abuse, if I'm honest. I don't have any stats to back that up, but sorry, my screen's gone weird. Where we got to, abuse, and applicants may not always have confidence in their effectiveness, understandably. Consequently, applicants should not be expected to return home on the strength of an injunction. To ensure applicants who have experienced actual or threatened violence, that again means domestic abuse. They just haven't changed the wording from the old law. Get the support they need. Authorities should inform them of appropriate specialist organisations in the area, as well as agencies offering counselling and support. I'm sure there's something else which might help us out as well. Yeah, there's another bit in this somewhere that's kind of also helpful, but I can't find it right now. But I suggest if you're involved or you want to know more about domestic abuse in the law, read this chapter. It's really strong. It's a really good bit of legislation. So let's get back to the questions. See if we've answered them. I think hopefully that so there was another element which I thought was in the code that is in the code of guidance. I just can't find it right now. That would also help this situation out. But that's the headline. Is no, it's not lawful. No, they don't help people in low income, and no, refuge is not the only option. If the person says I don't want to go into a refuge, then the council still has a duty to provide interim accommodation. Interim accommodation is not the same thing as a refuge. It doesn't count as that. So that's probably what I'd say about that. Yeah, and by the way, yes, you'll get into arguments with housing officers because they'll have been told all sorts of nonsense. You've got to kind of hold firm. I'm trying to think if I can. Can't think of an LGO decision where that's explicitly made. The first complaint I ever got upheld in Bedford involved them telling them that the only thing they could do is offer a refuge, and that was the first compensation I got for someone because of that. So, yeah, I appreciate that's not kind of legally binding, but yeah, I see if I can find some bits and pieces which would potentially add more information to that as well, because I think it's quite straightforward to argue legally. Anything more to say on that one, guys? If not, we'll go on to the next one, which so this is more about, I really like this question because it's more about kind of, okay, how to change the system. So I'm not quite sure what the context of this first bit is. It's probably on a video or a conversation, but a night shelter deemed a success because 50% of people who stayed there were moved on to accommodation. Do you think a good FOI would be how many people in the night shelter were later deemed to be owed a housing duty? I've seen this night shelter used to discharge from hospital rather than provide appropriate interim accommodation. I can't help but think if it wasn't there, their appropriate accommodation would have been provided earlier. So, yeah, really good issue. As I say, that in my experience of working in Bedford night shelter many years ago, was that we probably just made it easier for Bedford Borough Council just to not follow the law because they said, oh, don't worry about it, just go down to the night shelter at 7 o'clock, see if there's a bed. So it's a really important issue to tackle because hospitals should not be discharging people into a night shelter. They should be making a duty to refer, if nothing else. If they're competent, they'd also make a homeless application from hospital and get the person housed nice and straight, nice and easily. The FOY would need to be carefully thought through. One way of doing it will be to ask the council how many people that the council owed a duty to had previously stayed at the night shelter. And I realise I'm rephrasing the question there slightly, but that would enable the council to go through records and essentially see who had been in the night shelter in their address history. The problem with that is that's likely to encounter very quickly the time limit being claimed to have been reached, because the council doesn't have to respond to an FOI if it's going to take more than 18 hours of staff time to find it out. Now, so you could ask that question. They might come back and say that's going to take too long. Legally speaking, they then have to advise you how to refine the search, because you might say, well, how about just for the month of January? Never mind the last year, but how many people in January did the council have a duty to that had previously stayed in a night shelter? That would be a coherent FOI. I'm not 100% sure it's going to lead to kind of a really kind of strong position, because I think the nature of charities mean that you can't FOI a charity. So I think you might need to have a little bit more information in order to kind of make a case that the system needs changing. But I think it's really good. I think it forms part of a really good approach to start challenging local services and the way they're working at a systemic level. So that's my answer to that one. Because I think it's a really, really important thing to go after, the fact that hospitals and prisons and whoever else are not actually doing their job properly. But yes, I don't know if you guys have got anything to add to that at all.
So I guess just another good question around this could be particularly so it's perhaps focusing more on the discharge from hospital. But you could FOI how many duty refers from hospital institutions resulted in section 184, like a homeless application being made, or you could even then say and a follow up, and how many of those resulted in section 188 accommodation being issued. And so then you would know how many people were essentially falling through the gap. So that's an FOI we've done previously, I think for Bedford and Northampton.
Definitely
Um,
Bedford. Yeah.
yeah, and I think so it's a really interesting one, and you can do it for lots of different areas as well. So you can sort of say right, how many FOIs, I think when not FOI, sorry, how many duty to refers from the prison service, probation, from the DWP, from all of these places. And actually, when we did it, I think the local authority even included non-statutory services that were completing um duty to refers. So that's really interesting, because then again you can get a sort of idea of the duty to refer not working, and that's not quite the answer here, but actually it's kind of a roundabout thing of actually hospitals are sending people to the night shelter because the duty to refer is not working, right? And then you can sort of use that to build up, and potentially with that information then you can go and make another FOI about something that comes out of that, would be my thinking. But
Yeah.
I feel like I need to put a bit more on it. It's a good
No,
one
no,
though. It's really
I think
interesting.
that's really good. I think I'd add to it actually to FOI the hospital. So basically ask the hospital how many patients are identified as homeless, how many duty to refers were made, and then you go across the council, you say how many duty to refers received, how many, as Shannon just said, basically how many of them resulted in section 184 or section 188, all the rest of it. And so the only missing piece might be how many actually end up in the night shelter. But you could probably ask the hospital that as well, like how many duty to refers were made, how many referrals were made to the local night shelter. They might provide that. That would be less work than the council would have to go through all their records. So yes, I wish this person all the success on that one, because I think that's a really good thing to be going after. Right, next question. How are we doing for time? Not great, but okay. So what if the council end the relief duty 30 days early to someone fleeing domestic abuse with no income and mental health issues, depression, anxiety, panic attacks? 2 day prior, offer them unsuitable TA. That person X requested review. No answer on the review. Then end the duty at 6 a.m. Then offer same unsuitable TA under, I suppose, the main duty. Is that an attempt from the council to make person X intentionally homeless? Also, what if the accommodation is HMO in another council but not on HMO public register and makes it illegal? This is all good questions. So figure it out by looking at council HMO register. This is whoever's asked this question is onto something here. However, requesting information from the council that is, and they stated is a HMO, still no registration as such or a hotel, not been sheltered. Okay, right. Rather than read it all out, let me go back and give you a couple of bits of answers on this. So first of all, if someone is owed the main, or someone's going to be in priority need, so we're talking here about someone who's fleeing domestic abuse, highly likely they're going to be in priority needs. I say highly, I say there's a little bit of doubt because there's a couple of really obscure situations where you would not get automatic priority need, but you'd still be in priority need through vulnerability here. So let's go back to the code of guidance briefly. Let's just kind of flesh out a few bits that we can answer easily. So if I just advised against, that's the term they use, I'm sure. So yes, so 13.10, how authorities are advised against issuing a Section 184 notification, except in Section 193 main housing duty during the recess. Now, just to reiterate, people owed the main. Can you guys see this, by the way? I've lost everyone now. Where's everyone gone? Hold
You're
on.
not sharing anything currently.
That'll be why. Here we go. So yeah, here we go. So yeah, here we go. So 13.10. So yeah, sorry, just to reiterate, someone who is homeless because of domestic abuse, as in someone who's at risk of domestic abuse in their own home or has fled from their home, is highly likely to be homeless, in priority needs, not intentionally homeless, and local connection doesn't really matter in almost all cases. So assuming they're eligible for assistance, as in they have recourse to public funds, they will be owed the main duty, which is kind of why I'm just reading from this bit here. So housing authorities are advised against issuing a Section 184 notification, accepting the main duty, Section 103 main duty, during the relief stage. So the first bit of the answer to this question is, no, they can't end the relief duty 30 days early. They can't do that. It has to last for at least 56 days. The Section 193 duty cannot commence until the relief duty has come to an end. So that would need to be at least 56 days. And issuing notification during the relief stage might detract from activities to relieve their homelessness. So now, again, like I know it's kind of using quite soft language here, so they're advised against it. But again, this is the kind of nature of the guidance is they need to be following the guidance. So then the law says they must have regard to the Homelessness Code of guidance. So if they're going to depart from it, they need a fantastically good reason, a good excuse to do it. And I've never seen a council manage to do that yet. So let's briefly just go back to the question again because I've forgotten what other bits in it. So yeah, so no, they can't issue it. They can't end the relief duty 30 days early to accept the main duty. Then yeah, so it does seem to me I can't think why else they would end the relief duty 30 days early other than to try and essentially offer the same unsuitable property to them again, knowing they're likely to reject it. So, but I think as we have to say, I say have to. I think as is sensible for us to say, if you're offered accommodation, you should accept it and then challenge it. But in this situation, it would actually be fairly straightforward to show that the council didn't follow the law. So you go on the YouTube channel, search for the video, the best way to make a complaint, which I lay out all the things you want to do. And effectively, if this went to the LGO, one of the things they would recommend is that the council reinstate your main duty and basically put you back on the housing register as if they hadn't messed up in the first place. So that's hopefully answers the middle bit of the question. Then we've got this question about the HMO and the other council and the fact it's not on the public register. Now, this is important because, how do we get to this bit? It's chapter 16. Oh, there's an absolute nightmare section in chapter 16, but I actually think it might actually help out here. I'm not 100% sure I'm going to be able to find it right now, but let me see if I can find it. Because essentially what it says is if you're in priority need, which this person is, but hasn't actually been found in priority need yet, which is a weird thing. This is why I think this bit of legislation was not actually thought through properly. Oh, it's somewhere around here. Somewhere in this section here. So maybe here. If I just search for priority need at this point, it might just take me to the next bit it's in. So hold on. Priority. So it's talking about HMOs here. Right, here we go. Yeah, so this is the bit. So again, this might blow your mind because it's ridiculously convoluted, but so 16.20, whilst housing authorities must ensure any accommodation offered to homeless applicants is suitable, there are additional suitability requirements that apply to private rented accommodation offered under Section 193, subsection 7F, to end the main duty or secured for applicants in priority to prevent or relieve the homelessness. So effectively, what it sounds like, they've offered accommodation in the relief stage. So as in they're in the duties to relieve their homelessness. That's what relief duty means. They're in priority need because we're assuming it'd be because they're homeless because of domestic abuse, which is what the question implies. And therefore, you need to meet these additional bits. So I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be able to find the exact bit, but I'm pretty sure what this is essentially inferring is that unregistered HMOs would not meet the standards that would need to be for someone who is actually in priority need, even if they are being housed under the relief duty rather than the main duty. I don't think I can do a better job of explaining that again. So if you are confused by it, it's not just you. But I think let's go back to the question for a second and kind of give you a bit of a practical way forward. So I would right, okay, this is what I would do. I'd accept the property. I would then make a subject access request immediately and basically potentially just wait for that. But in the meantime, I'd put a review request in for the suitability of the accommodation, and I'd raise the fact that it's an unregistered HMO. I'd raise the fact that this person's in priority need because of domestic abuse. And I'd also raise the fact that the relief duty's blatantly been shadily finished before it should have been. And I'd raise those three bits in the complaint. I'd probably do them actually. I'd probably do the subject access request, make that first stage review request now. I say first stage, the review request now, but potentially you might also want to complain as well in the same letter because there's nothing stopping you basically saying review request and formal complaint as the title of the email or whatever. So that's what I would do, and then I'd kind of wait to see what they do next. So that would be my answer to that question, and I appreciate that it was heavily convoluted, but that's just the nature of the whole bullshit. How HRA, the Homelessness Reduction Act. This is why I hate it. It's because like who the hell actually understands that? Housing officers don't. I'm not sure most lawyers do, to be honest, in terms of the nitty gritty of it. So yeah, but I'm hoping there's some stuff in that which is helpful. Shannon Karras, do you want to add anything to that at all? No. Okay, next question. So sorry guys, just to reiterate, there are a lot of questions that are coming through the week, which I really like because it makes it easy for us. There's no character limit, and it just gives us a little bit of time just to work out which way's up before we actually come to the live stream. So next question is right, hold on a sec. So we're going to answer this question because I put it up, but this is actually, so we're going to go to the live stream now because now the questions from this point on are not anonymized, but I'm just going to do this one now anyway because we put it up there. So first of all, there is no such thing as a stupid question within housing law because housing officers tell so much they say so many things which are not true. It just perpetuates all sorts of myths. So there's, as I say, no such thing as a stupid question in this sector. I'm queer and I can't seem to find online information about cases like mine. My parents are homophobic. They're very religious and I live in a heavily religious area with them. So the community is also homophobic. I can't continue living there. I want to move out and be able to live my life because I can't do it here. I'd be in danger of abuse if I ever attempted to. I have no community support because I don't have any friends living around me, even though I lived in my city most of my life. That's partly due to my social isolation from my parents when I was younger. I wasn't allowed to leave the house if it wasn't for school. I don't have documentation of abuse and I have no way of providing that I'm in danger of abuse because of my sexuality. I don't want to go to the police or other authorities because I don't want my parents to be in any legal trouble. Can I get help from the council? If not, would it be best to camp out in another city for some months until eligible for? So that bit definitely not. There's some better ways forward for this person. I don't work and I've got no money. No longer in full-time education. I've worked cash in hand a few years ago, but my parents just took that money. So, okay, so you don't need to go camp out in another city. just say that bit first. There's another bit which I can kind of rule out as well, nice and easily, which is I've now lost. Where's it gone? So yeah, so you're not going to. Yeah, I mean, even if you did go to the police, your parents aren't going to be in any trouble. Like the police are not going to do anything because they don't do much about this sort of thing. So in one sense, I would say don't not report this situation to someone because of fear that your parents will get in trouble. They just won't. If it was me in this situation, I would probably start by approaching a support service. And I don't know what city this is about here, but there's I see if it still exists. There was a really cool organization called Exist Loudly. Let me see if it's still a thing. So it seems to still be there. So it's London based, but I know they deal with situations like this a lot. And so I would if I'd see if I can find some. I don't know if they're going to help me. They're going to thank me for saying this, but I think if I can find some contact details for them.
I think, sorry, I'm just going to interrupt
Yeah,
and
go for it.
and put in it's for the what's it called? Albert Kennedy Trust, I think is a really good one. For I'm going to put the link in the chat and you can put it in there.
Yeah, do that. Yeah, and so I can't find a contact for Exist Loudly. However, they are active online, so that might be another option for you. Let me
The
stick that.
homeless charity, so they can
Yeah.
help and advocate.
So yeah, links gone in.
I'm putting one in there as well. The Outside Project. Again, they're a queer advocacy homelessness service that specialise in sort of domestic abuse and these situations with like familial abuse that's happening.
So I mean, just to say, this kind of situation is not that unusual. So don't think that you're the only person in this situation if this applies to you. So I've actually just put it into the thing here as well because I've just realised that the live chat is not viewable once the live stream ends, so it's actually no good me putting the link just in there. But yeah, so just check out this link here. So AKT, just Google that, you'll find it. Again, the Outside Project and also Exist Loudly. Those are between them. I think there'll be some support there for this person. The reason I'm saying go to a support service first. Now, legally you shouldn't have to. However, practically speaking, it's probably going to be better that you do because effectively those kind of conversations you then have with support services form a little bit of evidence. Now, you shouldn't need evidence. The law has been set up so you don't need evidence because exactly like this sort of situation, you are not always going to have evidence. There's good reasons why you don't have evidence. And the LGO, the Local Government Social Care Ombudsman, has said clearly that the default position of council should be to believe people who disclose they've been abused. However, if this is somewhere like London, I can guarantee you that well, I can bet a lot of money that the housing officer will not follow the law. A few other things I'll say about this is that I was actually speaking with the chief exec of Exist Loudly, who was saying it's actually quite common for housing officers to essentially make their own personal judgments pretty obvious in these kinds of meetings, particularly when it comes around religion and LGBTQ stuff. So bear in mind that as well. So I would say there's evidence in here that this person is already subject to abuse, even though it might be quite kind of like subtle in terms of that, kind of the fact this person doesn't feel like they can be themselves and kind of just express themselves properly. But yeah, I think that's probably what I'd say for this person is to engage with some support. And then on the back of that, those conversations and potentially some onward referrals as well, there would be some potential. Yeah, I would say that at that point, then approach a council, and as I say, and then this person would simply be dealt with as a survivor of domestic abuse, and the law is really good for that situation. So I'm hoping that's kind of, again, there's some stuff in there which is going to be useful. Anything to add, guys? If not, we will go across to the live stream chat now. So, okay, so question here. If one lived in London and is threatened with homelessness, can one ask the council to maybe help with council flats in a different area, say Margate or Ramsgate? So in theory, yes. And and actually because London councils house people outside the area when they're not supposed to, if you then say to them, look, I'm actually quite happy to be housed in a different area, can you help out? Then it's certainly plausible that the council might be helpful with that sort of stuff. However, whether the housing officer will like that you're being that specific is probably another issue. So because, oh man, as a generalization, some housing officers are great, but as a generalization, if you go in there and ask for something really specific, you can almost guarantee they'll give you anything but that, because they just want to essentially, they don't want you, they don't, yeah, they can't afford to help out. That's the way they'll see it. So I think you can definitely ask. It's a sensible, yeah, it's a reasonable question to ask. It might be that they say as part of their kind of general stuff anyway, that they will help you with first month's rent and kind of upfront costs to get private rented. And then if you were then to secure a private landlord in Margate or Ramsgate, then yeah, the council, there's no reason at all why they wouldn't just help that work out. So yeah, in theory, that should be quite an attractive thing for a council to pick up on. I don't know how, yeah, I think it's a good thing to ask for. I just don't know how likely it is that that'll actually come through. But it's certainly something that can be asked. So it's a good question to put to him. Anything to add, guys? If not, right, let me get this one. It's a two-parter. And I'm struggling to actually copy and paste right now. Here we go. Cool, here we go. So if you've received a one-bedroom interim flat for TA, however, they have received a two-bed PHP, the council still couldn't find or provide according to PHP, then they give main duty relief. Is there a way to complain the place is too small to live with a child and prevention child growth? Baby can't walk or crawl due to how small it is. What can they do? Okay, so there's a little bit of confusion here in terms of, let me just try and just kind of, yeah, I'll leave that in us. So I don't quite understand what they mean by two-bed PHP. Like a PHP is a document which basically said this is what you need, this is what we'll do, this is what you'll have to do, this is what support you might need. So I don't know if they mean like the PHP says that they need a two-bed home. That's probably what they're talking about there, I guess. But in the interim, the council's basically offered a one-bed. That is not unusual. All accommodation that councils offer has to be suitable, but because interim accommodation or emergency accommodation is only supposed to be very short term, the council can get away with kind of overcrowding people basically, but that would not be okay in, that might be okay for a few weeks, but that would not be okay in the medium and long term. I'm also just a little, so they've then given main duty relief. I think maybe main duty. So I think they've ended the relief duty and they've accepted the main duty is how I'm going to read that. So again, once the main duty's been given, you can then challenge the suitability of the temporary accommodation without a lawyer. You can just basically section 202 it. So use a bit jargon, sorry. So section 202 is the bit of the law which enables you to challenge any decision really, or most decisions, let's say that. But the suitability of temporary accommodation, as in accommodation that you provided after the main duty is owed, that is, you can definitely challenge that. And effectively your argument is this is too small for the baby to develop properly, which is a good argument basically. So you then, I think you can expect to continue to live in a one-bed place whilst that review takes place, which can take up to 8 weeks. But then I would say the council should at that point say, yeah, fair enough, it's not suitable. We'll find you something which is more suitable in the medium term. So I think that's how that works. I think I'm hoping I've understood that question correctly, but I think that's what it's talking about. So you guys got anything to add to that at all? Just going to double check that there's not further further bits on that. I don't think so. So I think we're okay. So I think that's it. Anything to add, guys? If not, we'll go to
Sorry, shall I just add, while you're on there, depends on how old your child is. If she's due in them, it's not considered a person until after 1, but check your council's policy on overcrowding. and what your child needs. And if there's any
Yeah,
special needs of the child, like it doesn't have enough room to walk or crawl around, then might be worth putting in a complaint or talking to a housing officer about space for your child.
yeah.
It is
If you check
unlawful.
out the shelter website as well, it's pretty. There's quite a lot of detail on this issue, and they kind of specify what other rooms could count as being a bedroom. So, living room, dining room. I mean, it doesn't know there's a dining room here, but kind of. So there are things they can take into account as well. But again, like as with anything, there's nothing to, in a situation like that, there's nothing to lose by challenging it politely, and just basically saying you don't think it's suitable. Just to see what happens next, basically. I just want to double check I haven't missed a bit here. This kind of finishes halfway through a sentence, but okay. So what if housing officer does not process relief duty once an applicant submits homeless application via mail and webpage of council, and 4 months on the person becomes homeless? He is now in a shelter, and the only option offered to him is private rented accommodation. Even though he is accepted to be priority due to health conditions, his housing plan is not for social but private rented, I guess, private rented accommodation. So okay, so the relief duty does not kick in until you actually become homeless. So if you're likely to become homeless soon in the next 56 days, then the prevention duty should have kicked in. So by the sound of it, so the 4 months on and the person becomes homeless, up until the point where the person becomes homeless, they're under prevention duty rather than relief, and then the relief duty kicks in. So that doesn't necessarily mean, I mean, it sounds like the council's failed, but yeah, I don't think the relief duty kicked in yet. It's now in a shelter. So again, if the council accepts they're in priority need, then and let's say they're not intentionally homeless, then yes, they may well owe the main duty eventually. But bearing in mind, the main duty can still be discharged into private rented accommodation. So it has to be decent quality private rented accommodation. It has to be affordable, but there's no guarantee for social housing. And I don't think a PHP can say your only option is going to be private rented accommodation, but the PHP certainly can say it's highly likely that your option will be private rented accommodation, because that's just based on the facts. So I don't think it would be legal for a council just to literally just have a blanket policy where no one is able to get onto the housing register. But it may be the reality that housing register has 10-year average waiting time. So in reality, no one's going to get social housing. They're all going to get private rented. So I heard about a council I think it was Islington Council recently, which effectively would just, every single person who was going to them was basically getting offers of private rented accommodation. Almost, it seemed like almost regardless of whether or not they're in priority need, they were just kind of giving these private rented offers. So that's not it can be unlawful, but on the face of it, that's not unlawful. That is possible that would be okay. So yeah. Again, if you want to see a bit more detail on that, there's a couple of videos you might want to check out on the channel. One is called "Will I Get Council or Private Rented Accommodation?" because I kind of talk about that in a bit more detail. Um, uh, yeah, I can tell you some stories about this sort of thing. So hold on. So a person sent paperwork to council. The claim paperwork that was sent to them wasn't received. Person emailed the proof of delivery pic, and they magically found it. Could there be a better system? Yes, they could be. Well done for having proof of that you sent it, because this happens loads. And I've seen it happen a number of times. I think there's a story I tell quite a lot where essentially there was a period where loads and loads of people were basically being told that they hadn't submitted paperwork when they really had. And then a housing officer happened to open a particular drawer in a particular desk, and there was just like stacks of unprocessed paperwork that had been submitted. So yeah, so whenever you submit paperwork, I think the lesson here is, yes, there could be a better system, but you have to deal with that individually with the council. But yeah, in terms of what people should do is whenever they're submitting proof, they should basically send it via email and an attachment to the housing officer, so there is proof that you actually submitted it. Because if you just use the online system, there is no proof that you did anything, unless, as this person did, they took a screenshot or something of that kind of proof. But I think even then, you wouldn't necessarily get proof of what you sent. So I think it would still be better to send it in an email, or do both, send an email and use the online system, but basically make sure you can prove you sent it, because it will hold up your housing register application for many months potentially, and in effect increase the chance of getting private rented accommodation rather than social housing. So definitely worth kind of doing that properly. So well done to that person. Um, Okay, I don't know the answer to this, but it's a coherent question. Oh no, that's the same as before. Hold on, why is it not working? So section 8, ground 1, the landlord never wrote in my tenancy or verbal. As in the tenancy agreement, there's no mention of section 8. Does that mean? I'm not quite sure what that might mean. We could come back to that. That person, it might help if that person just kind of clarifies that a little bit. So yeah, yeah, we'll come back to that. Let's just do another couple of questions first, and then we'll just see if that person can clarify what exactly that means. So next question that came in through the week. Again, just to say that I've prioritized the anonymized ones rather than not anonymized. So 13, I'm currently going through this. I've been living with my brother for a few years in a housing association property. We got the property because of our mum passing for around 6 or so months. I've been victim of domestic abuse so yeah, the brother's been perpetrated domestic abuse twice. He's pulled a knife on me. First time was to frighten. Yeah, basically police were involved. My dad was aware as my sister. Threats to kill. He's arrested and charged, now waiting for court. As the property we share is in my brother's name and I'm down as an occupier, he has the power to kick me out. I need legal help. I cannot afford private renters. So I don't know in terms of the question around whether there's any kind of way of of the tenancy being reissued in the brother's name. I suspect not, but I could definitely be wrong about that. But I guess as a safety net, this person would be able to approach any local authority and make a homeless application, and they would be in priority needs. They wouldn't be intentionally homeless and all the rest of it. So the main duty would be owed. But as I said already, that does not guarantee that they're going to get social housing. It can still lead to private rented accommodation. Karis, this is probably more your neck of the woods in terms of tenancies being changed over. Have you got any experience with this one?
Yeah, it would really depend. And again, I think it would be best to go to domestic abuse. And the same, because you're a connected person, you would be protected under the domestic abuse, and you can go to, especially if it's in court, you can go to the local authority and get help and support that way. My brother's name and I'm an occupier. So you'd still be classed as homeless because it's unreasonable for you to stay there and you're fleeing domestic violence. And particular evidence here is that the police was there. The police are involved. And if he's there, the non-molestation orders and occupier orders, it would be, easier for you to go. So you should contact your local council and make a homeless application and talk to them. But also you can get advocacy in terms of domestic abuse agencies.
Yeah, I think if this person was to make a homeless application, then they would definitely get some advice and assistance around how this might work. So there's a bit of a cop out. If you made an application, in theory, you should get competent advice from the housing authority about what your options are in terms of occupation orders or whatever, and how that could be actually done. So yeah, Shannon.
I'm just thinking as well, would it be worth them sort of actually going to the housing association and saying, like, look, I've been a tenant or a occupier or what have you for a number of years. This is a situation, because I know in Bedford at least a lot of the housing associations have like domestic abuse specialist workers, and they have often their own sort of like, I think we call it like managed move, or like sort of basically like a housing register, but in their own system. So potentially they might be able to sort of like move you into another property that they have. Um, there might be other options to explore with sort of the housing association provider. But I couldn't tell you off the top of my head like what duties they have and stuff, but it might be an avenue worth going down.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I think because I think yeah, I mean, if this person can, I mean, it sounds, yeah, it is obvious. If this person can preserve their social tenant status, then that's going to be also, this tenant, occupation in social housing somewhere, that's obviously going to be better. So yeah, I think between the housing options, between the homelessness service and the housing association, there should be some link working anyway. And if this person was to, I mean, threats to kill, knives and stuff, this person should be under MARIC already, really. The MARIC referral should have been done by the police or whoever. And so that the MARIC is good at sharing this kind of information, and then the kind of housing association landlord and the council can then kind of like work together to actually act on it. So I think, yeah, I think whilst we might not know some bits of this for sure, definitely we do know that making an application and contacting the landlord would be very good things to do and could well lead to the right result, the good result in the end of it.
And also, there's a bit of a police issue here if they didn't offer you victim support and IDVA.
Yep. Yeah. Cool. This one's from the live chat. So I wonder what's the most remote council flat would be. Do they have cabins in the woods? Asking for a friend, of course. Yeah, I mean, I obviously, like, generally speaking, the more rural councils have much shorter waiting times. So if you have the ability, if local connection is not an issue, then yeah, I mean, I can't guarantee you a cabin in the woods, but you would potentially have a less, you wouldn't get a high rise in every area. So that is probably, if, as I say, if in a situation where local connection is not going to kick in, like for example, you're fleeing domestic abuse, then that kind of consideration is pretty sensible to actually think through. There's a couple more coming for the live chat now. I'm going to call time on live chat questions for tonight, guys. So the two that are in there are all good, but any further ones from this one, I'm just going to roll on to next week. So let's put something in there. No more questions tonight.
Can we to just go back to question 12? Sorry,
Yeah.
I missed that. So section 8, ground 1 should be where the owner occupier wants it. If that's not the case, please tell so. But that's where, if the landlord, even though they didn't give you written notice or tenants, or it's not in your tenancy, so this could be a defence if you go to your possession. However, the court will consider if it's like equitable for you for the landlord to still occupy the property, so they'll consider the circumstances of the landlord, if that
Okay.
makes sense. So it's not a guaranteed defence, but they can sometimes disperse with that requirement that you give them written notice. So we need to understand a bit more about what's happening, but you're at risk of homelessness now, so you can apply to the council and they should be able to help you.
And if they do go to the court hearing, then there'll be a duty solicitor there who can also, whose job it is to kind of advance this defence if it's relevant. So again, you'll get that legal advice on the door of the courts, as well as going to a council. So yeah, thanks, Karis.
Yeah, so at your court that you're registered with, there'll be a duty advisor, and the usher will say, do you want to see them? Or ask the usher if there's a duty advisor on duty.
Cool.
And you'll be scheduled for a short hearing, just to hear what's happened.
Yeah,
Okay.
what Karis just said. Yeah, cool.
Really sorry, guys. I'm gonna have to love and leave you because my headache is just slowly, gradually getting worse looking at the
No, that's
laptop.
cool.
So
Yeah, it's cool.
apologies. I'm gonna head off and I hope the rest of it goes all right.
Yeah, thanks, Shannon. No, thanks for your time. Appreciate
See
it.
you next
See you
week.
soon. Yeah, take
Bye.
care. We're nearly done. So, question 15: prevention duty failed. Applicant is told because of the waiting time for social housing, the housing officer cannot refer for housing register. That's definitely not legal. As I say, they have to put the person on the housing register. There just might be no prospect of actually getting housed, but there's two different things. He's told to accept private rented accommodation in order to be deemed eligible. So the word eligible within the homes application process means something very specific. It's essentially about having recourse to public funds. So it can be a little bit confusing to use the word elsewhere. So yeah, I mean, but basically, I'm not sure it's worth challenging the council. I mean, what the council's saying is unlawful. I'm not sure it's worth challenging it, because even if you challenge it and they put you on the housing register, as I say, if there's a 10-year wait, you will get private rented way before you get social housing. So yeah, I think, I mean, yeah, and as I say, like, the council can discharge their full duty or the relief duty into private rented accommodation with either the main housing duty itself or what's called a final accommodation offer, which is a 6-month assured short hold tenancy in the private rented sector. So and you can't stop that. You can't unless you can show it's unsuitable for some reason, or then you're not going to be able to win that argument. So as I say, although the council shouldn't be saying that, I don't know that it's worth challenging it, because as I say, they'll put you on the housing register. Great, you're 150th in the queue, and the average waits are years and years and years, by which point you'll get the private rented offer anyway. How many have we got left? 3 more left. Okay, so did we do that? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think we do. Yeah, cool. Okay. So number 16, I've been evicted from private accommodation back in July last year. Went to council. They told me they would help, which I later got temporary accommodation. They did their 56-day thing and found me intentionally homeless. They won't be out on the 5th of this month. They want me out on the 5th of this month. I've not had any help from no one. I've have severe mental health and physical problems. They won't hear from me prove all I need a solicitor in making my mental health worse since this has happened. I don't know what to do. It's all over an electric meter. So, okay, so this person definitely needs to challenge the intentional homeless decision. There's various ways in which that there's many people won't be intentionally homeless, even if the council say that they are. The problem that might come here is that when you get the intentional decision, you've got 21 days to actually challenge it. And if you miss that deadline, it becomes quite tricky to then get an out of time review. Now, in theory, I mean, we would on Monday, it's worth looking at Will Flax, the live stream on Will Flax from the Monday before this one, because we talked about a case called Ivory versus Well in Hatfield, where essentially the argument was that someone had been evicted from accommodation like 7 or 8 years ago, and then there was new medical evidence that they had had mental health problems at that time, which had contributed them to not claiming housing benefit, which then led them to lose the property. Now, the actual case is not settled because it was just a question of whether there was new information to trigger a fresh application. But that would be an argument where, and we see it a lot, where councils don't take the effects of mental health into account when looking at intentional homelessness. So what I'd say is, yeah, I mean, potentially this would be a case for Virgo solicitors that we mentioned before. So give them a call as soon as humanly possible, like tomorrow morning, because if it's still within time, then that's going to probably be an easier way forward. But even if it's out of that 21-day period, it's still worth giving Virgos a ring, because there would be other things that could be done here. So I'm hoping that makes sense. But yeah, that it's not a lost cause by any means. Ring up Virgo solicitors, just Google it. Karis, who answers the phone on Virgos? Can it be anyone, or is it? Or you're on?
Yeah, we have the reception team.
Yeah. And I mean, and what's the best thing for people to do? To ask for Karis, or just kind of go through the process as normal?
In this case, we'll just ask for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay. Number 18. Okay, so recently decided to speak up about domestic abuse. Sorry, I should have probably grouped all the domestic abuse ones together, because that would have probably made it easy to answer and easier to follow. Approached Westminster Council for help because I'm now homeless because of it. The young lady that helped and interviewed me was very kind, so kind and helpful. I thought that I'd have to convince and show proof, but when I offered to show proof, she said that's not necessary. However, do feel free to show us if you want. So I ended up providing proof. The same day, she said that she was going to start the process for me to find temporary accommodation. After watching the videos, I think she meant interim accommodation. Yeah, so some people use it interchangeably. I asked her how do things work? Will I be put on waiting list? What band or level of priority will I be getting? She replied, I don't know. I'm your external caseworker. There'll be another in-house worker that you won't get to see in person that will be working on your case. I was confused but grateful nonetheless. Please explain to me what is happening to me in my case and what is the most likely outcome. So it looks positive. Yeah, as we kind of said already, people who are homeless because of domestic abuse will be homeless. They'll automatically be in priority need. They won't be intentionally homeless, and local connection won't really kick in. So assuming they're eligible for assistance, as in they have recourse to public funds, then they will be owed the main duty. In terms of what happens next, this is not an unusual situation. Councils have different teams that kind of do triage and kind of like, temporary accommodation, and then the full decision. I'd be surprised if this new housing officer that not met yet does not actually make contact with this person, because they'll have other questions they'll need documents at some point. So I think that would be probably what I'd expect, is there will be some contact, maybe not in person, but over the phone or whatever. And effectively they'll just be kind of just dotting the I's, crossing the T's. The second housing officer might want more evidence than the first, but if this person's got proof, then great, it makes it even easier. And effectively they'll ultimately be owed the main duty. However, as we've said, particularly London councils, particularly Westminster, the pressure on housing is immense. So I would say it's much more likely you'll get a private rented offer. and it might not necessarily be in Westminster. It just depends on the circumstances. So yeah, I think so on this information, there's nothing to be worried about here. I think it sounds like the council's actually following the law, which is rather good. But I think don't let the second housing officer like just kind of go silent. Do kind of politely chase it up and kind of pursue contact with them so you can find out what the updates are. But I think other than that, I don't have anything else to add to that. Karis, you got anything?
Sorry, I didn't know if I was on mute, but I would keep all correspondence in writing and that you can document what you're sending to and from them.
Yeah, cool.
Particularly if you're changing from external caseworker, because there'll just be someone that initially gathers the information. And if you're transferred to like an in-house one or someone to review it, they might lose communication in between changing caseworkers to
Yeah.
keep a record of everything you're sending or they're sending you.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, good stuff. And then finally, last question for tonight is, wait a minute, that's not right. What's it just done there? Hold on. Let's try that again. So yeah, hopefully this, yeah, here we are. So currently in prevention duty of being served with Section 21, and our local authority has banned this as asset 7. As after financial assessment, they said it's over the threshold. However, I've asked for a review of the decision, but I just want to know where we stand with this, please, as housing privately in our area is extortionate and completely unaffordable for us. We've got 3 kids. The Section 21 ends on the 26th of April. Can you advise, please, just to add per their allocation policy for someone in prevention duty who would normally be owed the main duty in due course? It says they would be band 3. So I just don't understand it. So, okay. There's a limit to what we can say here because I don't know which council this is, and I certainly don't know what this bit up here might be about. Banded us at 7, so most policies don't have 7 bands. Southampton is the only one that springs to mind because they've got a point system, which is the only one I've seen like that, where you can kind of get different points for different things rather than actual banding. But yeah, as I said, I've never seen a council policy with 7 bands in it, maybe close to it, but I think the answer is you have to go and study the policy. So, where does it have something in the policy which talks about financial assessment and thresholds and how much you're earning? And if so, is the council's position correct? And if not, how do you challenge it? What I'd also probably say is that, just as you said on previous weeks a lot, in most cases, the day after the Section 21 expires is when you become homeless, as in when the interim accommodation duty would be owed, unless the council it looks like they're going to be able to convince the landlord to keep you. So if that's not the case, then basically you're homeless on the day after the Section 21 expires, rather than being kept in prevention duty. So on the 27th of April, that would be basically. So yeah, so I'm not sure what else I can say other than this person appears to have actually read the policy, which is good, and it seems that the council's position is not in line with their policy. So essentially, what you do is you just quote that bit of the policy which is relevant to the housing officer and say, "Look, I think you've got this wrong. Can you have a look at this, please? How can I ask for a review of it?" And hope that then works. So I think that's probably what I could say. I mean, as we said before, just because you might have finances does not mean the council doesn't have various duties to you. So, but yeah, it's where we can't really kind of comment because it's the local policy, which is all locally set, which we don't even know which one it is here. So, yeah, sorry to be not very helpful there, but I don't know what else we can say at this point. I mean, if the person comes back and says, "Oh, it's this policy," then we can maybe have a dig around in that policy next week. Karis, you got anything to add on this one?
I would get your local councillor involved as well.
Yeah, yeah, cool. Okay, cool. So next week's live stream will also be on the Wednesday, because it's my son's birthday on the Thursday. As far as I know, I'm pretty sure we're back on Will's channel on Monday. If you haven't subscribed to Will's channel yet, please do. Just give him some support. I think, yeah, the kind of stuff he's got planned is really cool in terms of the, kind of using tech and stuff to make it all flow and stuff. Thanks to those who have subscribed on this channel. So yeah, appreciate that. The numbers are going up nicely. We're about to hit 4,000 at some point soon. And yeah, keep the questions coming. Basically, as I say, hopefully that was useful, that we covered some useful information. The most important thing with all this stuff is that you're just methodical, and just kind of just break the big problems down into little problems and just go step at a time. So yeah, again, I'm hearing back from people who've kind of used this sort of stuff, and it's kind of worked out really well for them. So it can be done. Just kind of keep plodding on, basically, and keep, yeah, don't give up is the key. So yeah, we'll see you next week. See you on Mondays, on Monday if you're on Will's channel. But yeah, we hope you guys are doing all right out there, and this kind of, yeah, makes things better. So take it easy.